I think it's, Sam, is it just us today? Do we have any other managers attending?
That they are listening in. So if we need them for anything, they're listening in, but they're not going to be on the panelist.
Okay. Oh, there they are, attendees.
Say
All
hi
right,
to them all.
Well, let's go ahead. We'll get started, and we're recording. So my name is Holly O'Neill, and I'm serving today as the facilitator for your session. I'm really pleased to be with you all again. And as you may recall, we had originally scheduled to have some time with Anne McFarlane of Jurassic Parliament to do a refresher on parliamentary procedure and also to address some of the questions that had come up in our retreat. So that didn't work because of tech meltdown in Anne's region, I guess. So we rescheduled, and we're here today, and super excited to have Anne. So I'm going to invite us to just do a brief round of introductions for everybody who's on the screen right now. I think you all know each other, but just for the pleasure of just your name and how long you've been in your position, and just anything you want to share about how you're doing today. So Jerry, how about you? You look ready.
Hi, I am Jerry Severe, the Administrative Services Director at the Port. I've been here for about 23 years, and I think I've got you all beat on, on the screen anyway today. And it's a beautiful day here in Olympia, so.
Okay, thanks. Glad you're here.
The sun helps me feel better.
Yeah. Commissioner Zita, you're up.
Hi, I'm Zita. This is my 6th and last year at the Port of Olympia. I'm concerned. My brother has been in the ICU with COVID for a week.
Oh. I'm
sorry to hear that. Really sorry.
Really sorry to hear that, Commissioner.
And thank you also for telling us, because it's really important that we know these basic things about what is going on with each other, because those, then we can just have an understanding and compassion for how we are as humans in the room together. So thank you, Zita. And I'm sorry. Okay, Joe, Commissioner Downing, you're up.
Well, hi, everybody. I know everybody. It's nice to see you all. Sense of community here at this time, and I'm doing fine. And it's my 5th year on the Port Commission. I love the Port. I enjoy serving with my fellow commissioners and working with staff. So,
thank you. All right, Commissioner McGregor.
Well, thank you. Yeah, great to be here. And I too am sorry, Commissioner Zita, to hear that news. I thank you for sharing that. I'm 1/3 of the commission, have been in the commission as a 15-year veteran, if you might call it that, and another 27 years on top of that in the port industry. And if you hear noise behind me, it's the wonderful music of my granddaughter as she's learning the viola. So.
Nice. All right, Aspen.
Hi, I'm Aspen Humiston. I'm the Executive and Commission Coordinator, and I have been in this position for about 8 months now. Although it feels like it's just been like a month. Things have been a whirlwind since I started.
Kidding. All right, Anne.
I'm Anne McFarlane with Jurassic Parliament, and this is my 21st year of providing services under that name. And it's a great pleasure to work with you all because, as we know, Robert's rules and parliamentary procedure are very important, but few people are willing to make the commitment. And so I'm very grateful to be here again with you.
Okay, thank you. And Sam?
Sam Bigimini, Executive Director, and been here just over 2 years now. Commissioner Zita's sharing with us reminds me that, as while I think we can, see some light at the end of the tunnel, my husband is actually in a group now where he can get a vaccine as educators, and went out this morning at 5 o'clock thinking he might get one, but not yet, but hopefully this week. But we're still not through this thing yet. And so, I think as the sun starts to shine and we can see, I think we also need to, stay diligent and mindful of the uncertain times and challenging times that we're still in. And it's sunny.
Yeah, that helps. Well, thank you all. And thank you for all of the folks who are attending and watching today. If there will be certain points where we'll check in and see if people have questions, or if at any point the attendees that we have here include some of our capable staff. So if we have questions for them, they're there. I want to go through just a couple of protocols. I'm going to just keep speaking up in my big voice. So protocols. Remember, on the view screen, you can either have it on speaker view or gallery view, depending on what's easiest for you. I'll keep you in gallery view the whole time. And so during the retreat, primarily Anne will be presenting, and she'll let us know when it's time for questions. Anne, I'm going to leave that to you. But if we do get into a discussion at any point during the retreat, and when we wrap up, just remember to raise hands. Actually, at any time, just remember to raise hands to be recognized to speak. And also just remember, bear in mind, we're working together to create this culture of respect and of civility and of kindness. And we do that in how we speak and how we how our body language and facial expressions are, but also just how we show up. So I'm going to really invite you, just as we did last time, to remember to stay fully present in the meeting. If we have to take a break, because something comes up, we'll just take a break. But just as much as we can for everybody to just be here in the room together. Okay, so those are basically our goals for the day. I'm going to, Aspen, can you pop up the agenda real quick? Okay, so again, we're on this process. I'm going to speak to the intention, which is that today we are going to do a refresher on parliamentary procedure, and our overall goal is to build common understanding of how we can work together to fulfill the mission of the port. Ideally, this work will lead us to being able to spend most of our time not worrying about the process and just worrying about and talking about and digging into the content of our work. So that's why we're really aiming for building these efficiencies. So we're going to have Anne go from 1:15 until 2:15, so a full hour. We'll take a 10-minute break. We'll continue discussion. And then towards the end there, we'll wrap it up. So throughout the retreat, I'm going to be kind of tracking from the questions that we've raised before and Anne's answers. And then at the end, just make sure we're all on the same page so we can really tie it up with a bow. So any questions about the retreat agenda? Okay, so Aspen.
Zita has her hand up.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, Zita.
There were two items that we had agreed to discuss when we planned this retreat. Mm-hmm. And I think we reaffirmed at our last meeting that we would indeed discuss them at some point. One is about public comment in meeting minutes, and the other is about accuracy in public documents. For example, the September 28th transcript. Not sure whether those are on our agenda or not.
Yes, they both are.
Great, thank you.
Yep, we made sure that Anne got those was alerted to make sure she incorporated those in. So thanks, Zita. Yeah, for making sure. Okay, any other thoughts about the agenda? Questions? I'm going to scroll up and down. Okay, let's do it. So let's go ahead. We'll take the, Aspen, you can close down your screen. And then I think, Anne, if you wanted to maybe just, before you put your screen up, just tell us a little bit about how you'd like to run the session.
Well, we've got 8 segments, and my thought is we'll take questions after each segment. So I'll cover a portion, and then we'll have questions and any discussion that you would like on that content, and then we'll move on. So if that sounds good.
Great. So I guess what might be helpful is for everybody, if questions come up for you during a section, just make sure to jot them down. So then when Anne ends a section, then you can make sure to ask them. Okay. Okay, Anne, the show is yours. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you so much. And I'm just delighted to be here. Let me adjust my view so that I can see you all. Zoom lets you do so many things, but you have to do them fresh every time. You can't set it in a certain way. There we go. It's coming up now until it's your turn. So naturally, I had to start with my dinosaurs. They do not play the same role today that they did last year, but nevertheless, they're there. So we're going to talk today about, we're going to have a Jurassic Parliament refresher. So we'll be covering some of the things we talked about last year, going into them in more depth, and then also more breadth. We'll be covering additional topics which we did not cover last year, and the topics that were brought up at your retreat. So this is my plan here. Introduction, meeting discussion, procedural motions, inappropriate remarks, virtual meeting etiquette, elected commissioner role and authority, other topics, and then conclusion. So the purpose of the meeting is to review key principles, guidelines, and rules from Robert's Rules of Order that will strengthen your meeting process. And as always, I want to say that I'm not an attorney, and nothing in this session constitutes legal advice. So if your attorney tells you something different, please do what your attorney says. So let's start with meeting discussion. We talked last year about the principle of equality, that all members have equal rights, privileges, and obligations. And so therefore, discussion in commission meetings is not a conversation. It's debate, and it has its own rules. And one of those is that wonderful fundamental guideline: no one may speak a second time until everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once. Just critical and absolutely vital principle for effective discussion at meetings. And although it's there, oftentimes groups don't follow it, and not just commissions, boards, councils, lots of other bodies don't follow it, because when it's a small group, groups tend to discuss their affairs in conversational mode. In conversations, dominant people tend to dominate and agreeable people tend to let them. So you must have a structure to make sure that everyone has an equal chance to speak. And that has the advantage of being fair and also efficient. So these are the things that we recommend to achieve this goal. Seek recognition before speaking. No one may speak a second time until everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once. No sidebar conversations, whispering, or texting. Members may not interrupt each other or the chair, but the chair may interrupt in order to enforce the rules. I mentioned this last year, but perhaps did not give it adequate prominence. This is something that the chair does have the right to do if necessary. So seeking recognition, the chair controls who speaks when. You raise your hand and you wait to speak until the chair gives you some sign. And you don't do what those very fancy physicians did in one system I was working with, of raising your hand and starting to speak at the same time. I would like to say it's a back and forth. It's a ping-pongy kind of thing. So the chair can keep track of who has spoken and who wishes to speak using a chart. You can empower your vice chair to do this. It's great training for them. Or you can use the round robin. So this is our sample of a speaking chart where you have everybody's name, and each time you just check people off as you go. And some groups, because there is such a thing as an order effect, where a person who speaks first has more weight, Some groups like to have the first round be Garcia, Jackson, Juma, the second round be Jackson, Juma, Lee, the third round be Juma, Lee, Patel, and so on. They just kind of work their way through the alphabet. It's something you could consider, although you are such a small commission that I don't think it's a big deal. Commissioner McGregor?
Are you screen sharing now? Because I'm not seeing anything but the 8 of us, so I just didn't know.
I am. It says you are screen sharing. Do the rest of you see this?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
Okay. Then I need to do something. That's fine. I'll listen and figure.
Okay. All right. So there's the speaking chart. Now, if you use the round robin method, if it's not your turn, don't comment on others' remarks. And of course, this includes the chair. Sometimes chairs kind of get carried away and they start answering back each person as they speak, which isn't allowed. You have to wait until it's your turn to speak. So when you have not been recognized under Robert's Rules of Order, you have a duty to remain silent. This I know is a shock to some people. I worked with one city council where a council member was offended at what the chair had said and kept on insisting and arguing back with her. And of course, it was made worse by the fact that he was in error. He kept saying things about Robert's rules and what he was entitled to that weren't correct at all. So now I have to have this new slide, duty to remain silent. Now the exception obviously is a point of order when it's essential. So this is a great paper that we have, Rights and Responsibilities of the Member, and I will be sending this to you after our session for reference, and that goes into some of these details. Now, when a member has the floor, they have the right to speak until they've completed their comments. Members may not interrupt each other. And one of the big advantages of Zoom meetings, to my mind, is we're seeing much less interrupting than we did in in-person meetings. But the chair may interrupt members when necessary to bring them to order, and members may interrupt to make a point of order when essential. Now, that's not something we recommend doing very much, and I'll talk about it in our next section on procedural motions. Permission is required to read something aloud at a meeting or to share a video. If a commissioner wishes to do this, they can request permission and the chair will take a vote. So if I'm a commissioner and I'd say, I'd like to read this very interesting statement by the governor pertaining to COVID-19, the chair would say the commissioner has requested permission to read the statement aloud. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. So it's the chair's duty to make sure that the body agrees to hear it. And that's a member responsibility, is not to read aloud or by extension to be sharing a video without permission from the group. And then what about putting something on the record? You know, people sometimes say, I want this on the record. Well, you as a port have chosen to prepare action minutes, which is great. So they don't include details of comments. So according to your policy, items may not be added to the minutes in order to put them on the record. Your vote is your record. That's something that I think when we see a lot of C-SPAN, we kind of imagine, you know, I want this on the record, but it doesn't apply in this instance. Now, this is a new technique, which I didn't talk about to you all last time, but it's really, really handy. And for exploring complex issues, particularly at work sessions, each commissioner gives their views on a given topic before any amendments or changes are considered, and the staff note the views on the screen. So you get a chart like this with the positives, the negatives, and the questions. You can just throw up a Word document. And then as each commissioner states what they think, the staff can type them in. Not by name, it's just to collect people's views. But this enables you to see what everybody thinks before you start debating any changes. Because one of the disadvantages of the Robert's Rules amendment system is once you've offered an amendment, that's all you can talk about. Well, maybe the amendment wasn't the most important thing to resolve. Maybe you want to resolve some issues pertaining to the whole bigger main motion first. So the exploratory round robin lets you do that. We developed this for Seattle Children's Research Institute, and they were very happy with it. They found that it cut their committee meeting time in half and was very, very effective. So I'll send you this paper, Make Better Decisions Using the Exploratory Round Robin, in case you might want to employ this, particularly in study sessions. Now, I know that structuring discussion in the ways I've described can be frustrating. And commission members sometimes just say, I wish we could just hash it out and have a free-form discussion. Well, usually the Open Meetings Act and the press of time mean that that's not going to serve your commission well, unfortunately. However, sometimes there is benefit in the conversational style or informal discussion. It can provide a sparky flow of ideas. For example, at work sessions or study sessions, you might decide to discuss something in this way for a little bit. And as long as no one person dominates, it's okay. But we strongly recommend that you do not make the conversational style your ordinary or your default style of discussion. That's our advice on that point. So before we move on, does anyone have any comments or observations about these different thoughts on meeting discussion?
Can you go back and,
oh,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Bill, and then Joe.
I'm just gonna, are you gonna talk more about the round robin approach?
No, no, I wasn't planning on it, but
Okay, so my question then, I'll ask the question then. So we've used that on a couple of occasions, and I find that to be very beneficial because it lets one commissioner talk for X number of minutes. And I think the chair has been gracious, gracious to give us each 5 minutes to talk, and then we'll go to the next commissioner and allow them to talk for 5 uninterrupted minutes. And then after everybody has spoken, we go back around again to see if there's been any new thoughts or to bring to the discussion. So I just think that that's been worked very well, in my opinion. So I just wanted to, and 5 minutes seems to be enough time for us to give our discussion, and then we get another opportunity once everybody has spoken. So anyway.
well, that's great. I'm delighted to hear that. Holly, who is next?
Yeah, Commissioner Downing.
Oh, hi. Can you go back to the putting things on the record? You had a slide about that. I just want to see that again.
Yes.
Okay, action minutes, details or comments. Items may not be added to the minutes in order to put them, quote, on the record. So sometimes we have a commissioner that might say, I'd like this included in the minutes, or, you know, that kind of statement. And so you're saying by this that it's outside the province of the commissioners to add or subtract from the minutes, other than, let's say, corrections based on the fact that we have a policy of preparing action minutes. I mean, I was just trying to get a little bit more clarity on this.
Well, that's how I read your policy, that your
Okay.
policy is to prepare action minutes. And so it's not going to include these other things. And
Okay.
personally speaking, you know, I think that's great, because the point of minutes, according to Robert, is to record the actions taken by the body. Now, sometimes people say to me, what about explaining the reasons for a motion? You can do that by preparing a preamble. If you have a motion and you want it on the record, what the reasons were why the commission did that, you can add a preamble. Whereas blah, 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 and whereas blah, 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 now therefore the port decides to do X. So that is the better way. And in fact, I will add this to the to my slides for the future, that's a way to put something on the record. But of course, it's the whole commission voting to agree to the preamble.
I see. Oh, Thank you.
That would actually probably be a good blog topic, preambles. So Holly, who is next?
Yeah, Sam's next.
Yes, and the commission, particularly when they're adopting resolutions, will often have a preamble in that. So that's a way that they can put things on the record there. I did have a staff member ask me this just before, and I wanted, since we're on the topic of discussion, frequently a commissioner will say, you know, in response to a motion, I'll second for the purposes of discussion. And they were like, is that a thing? Like seconding for the purposes of discussion? Like, you know, is like, what does that really mean? Is that an actual in Robert's rules, or is it just, you know, a custom that people have developed?
Well, and it's redundant to say that, because all that a second means in Robert is that you would like to discuss it. It used to be that seconding meant that you supported the motion, but that's not the case anymore. And so when you say second, you simply mean, I'd like to talk about this.
Yep.
You can actually second a motion you disagree with if you want to explain why it's a bad idea or make sure it gets voted down. So there's no problem with someone saying second for the purpose of discussion, but that's not a action that needs to be recorded in any way, because it's already what the purpose of a second is.
Anybody else? I'm scanning up and down here.
Commissioner Downey?
Joe, go ahead.
And so therefore, to build on that, so I think that, you know, as the most recent chair, am I remiss in not saying the following? It's been first and seconded. Is there any discussion? Is that the appropriate?
It is correct to say it has been moved and seconded. It has been moved and seconded that we do X. Is there any discussion?
Okay.
That's correct. Yes, that's useful. It's useful for you to say that. And the other important thing for you other commissioners to know is that the way that the chair states it is the official text of the motion. So if something in what the chair says is not what you said in your initial motion, you should speak up and say that wasn't quite it. Make sure that the chair's statement is it. And of course, once the chair has made that statement, once it's been moved, seconded, and stated by the chair, the item belongs to the commission as a whole. It doesn't belong anymore to individual members. Sam?
So I've actually had people outside the organization that have watched our meetings that say, that have noted that from their point of view, that our process can be unusual in that staff will present an item, and then there's discussion about it, then the motion is made, then perhaps there's further discussion, or perhaps there a vote. And what they have said is, like, staff in their organizations, staff makes a presentation, then a motion is made, then discussion happens. So there's no discussion before the motion, that the discussion is actually follows the motion. So yeah, if you could just comment on that, and what's the more proper way.
It's a great point. So in large groups, the large assemblies, you must have a motion before any discussion begins.
No.
Robert has special rules for small boards, which you certainly are, and Robert allows discussion before a motion is made. But if you have a staff prepared draft motion that you're going to take up, we believe it's better to do this sequence. The staff presents the item and any informational questions are asked, strictly informational. Then someone moves the motion and seconds it, and then you have the discussion. We have found it's more productive to separate those different points out. Now, a couple of things. In some cities that I've seen, the staff questions turn into discussion. It kind of morphs. You know, somebody says something and somebody else says, wouldn't it be better if we did X? So it's better not to do that. It's better to keep the staff presentation strictly informational. The other odd thing is, one city told me, they said, well, we don't like to move a motion before discussion because we think if we move it, it implies that we're going to accept it. Well, that's not Robert.
Mm-hmm.
That's not Robert at all. If you move the motion, you're just playing it out there, you know, you're just taking your dinosaur and putting it up there, and maybe you're going to pass it, or maybe you're going to toss it, you know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So that's the Robertian position on that. Anybody?
Okay. I just this comment. We're not even a half hour in, and we've already had one flying dinosaur, and we were concerned that we weren't having any flying dinosaurs. So glad we got that over with.
All right. Well, we don't want to disappoint. So, all right. So any further questions on this portion?
Betty? And I had one clarification that on, you said for commissioners or members of a group to read out loud, read something out loud, or to share a video.
Mhm.
would it be a correct assumption that would also include sharing any PowerPoint slides?
Well, I haven't even got to PowerPoints yet.
Oh, okay. So you're going to come back to that. Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
The assumption here would be normally something prepared by somebody else, that if you wanted to share a video or read something.
Okay. Got it. Anybody else? More comments on any of these, this first section? Okay. And I think you got it. You're up.
Okay, so now we're going to go through 4 procedural motions, and I covered 2 of these last year, so we're going to double or nothing now today. So the first was point of order. So as you know, in our system, it's represented by a flying dinosaur. So we're discussing a motion here, and somebody makes a point of order, and it flies over the head of the current motion, and the chair has to deal with it immediately. This represents the urgency of it. It comes up and the chair just bats it out of the sky. So the chair has to be able to issue rulings for a point of order. That's why we use the flying dinosaur metaphor. So a point of order is a motion claiming that a procedural mistake has been made. According to Robert, it can only be made by a member of the body, but we recommend authorizing key staff to do so also. And I do know of cities where this is the case, where the city manager or the clerk is entitled to raise a point of order. The public may not raise a point of order. If you go back to in-person meetings and you have somebody standing up in the audience and saying, point of order, they are out of order. The 2 difficult things about this are, 1, you may interrupt a speaker if necessary. You actually may interrupt, although we don't recommend it. And second, it must be timely. You have to make a point of order at the time of the offense. You can't bring it up the next day. So we had that awful example in Auburn where a city council member, under her breath, but fully audible to the Cub Scouts in the front row, said, "Thank you, you MFer," to her colleague. And, you know, it took them a month to recover from that. There were 5 letters to the editor and all sorts of other stuff. You know, somebody should have said right away, point of order, obscenity is not allowed at our meetings. So you got to keep in mind that it has to be timely. You can't bring it up later. So I'm going to give you an example of a point of order. Let me just make sure that I've got the sound correct. Here we go.
Point of order.
State your point.
That comment breaks our rules of decorum.
The point is well taken. Members may not use this term. So I'm going to play it again just for fun so we can really get it into
Point of order.
State your point.
That comment breaks our rules of decorum.
The point is well taken. Members may not use this term. So the key thing is for the chair to issue a ruling. And I want to clarify something. I did have the opportunity to observe some of your meetings and see the ways that you were applying the things that we had covered, which was great. But I want to mention that you make a point of order if a rule has been broken. If a rule has been broken, don't make a point of order because you think someone made a mistake or because you disagree with what they said. You have to bring that point up when it's your turn to discuss. The only reason for point of order is if a rule has been broken. And this is the process. The member says point of order. The chair says state your point. The member says the word malarkey is insulting, and the chair issues a ruling. The point is well taken. Members will refrain from using this word, or the point is not well taken, whichever the chair chooses. Now notice that we're using the third person here to keep things neutral and lessen conflict. The chair states the general rule. You're the voice of Robert. Don't say you're out of order. I was at a city council meeting once where the mayor said, "John, I think you're off topic." Not a good idea. Don't do that, because that personalizes things and instantly creates a conflict between the 2 members. So the other thing that's very important is when in doubt, ask the group. The chair can always ask the group to decide if a point of order is correct, if it's well taken or not. The chair doesn't have to take all the heat. So let's have an example. The chair is uncertain about the word malarkey. The chair will ask the commission to decide this matter. All those who believe that the word malarkey is insulting, please say aye. And the commissioners who agree say aye. All those who believe the word malarkey is not insulting, please say no. And the commissioners opposed say no. And then the chair announces the result. The ayes have it, and the word malarkey may not be used, or the noes have it, and the word malarkey is acceptable. So this is a great tool. This is a wonderful tool, and I strongly recommend it to you, that although the chair has the duty of ruling on a point of order, the chair can immediately turn to the group, and it simplifies things so much. It just makes it really clear what the group thinks. And the chair can turn to the group for other matters as well. This is a power that the chair has. So I'm going to give you another example. The chair believes that remarks about UFOs landing at our airfield are not germane and will ask the commission to decide whether the commissioner may continue speaking on this topic. All those who believe that the commissioner may continue speaking, please say aye. And the commissioners in favor say aye. All those who believe that the commissioner may not continue, please say no. And the commissioners say no. And then the ayes have it and the commissioner may continue speaking, or the noes have it and the commissioner will cease from speaking. So this is where the chair is exercising that authority, but in the service of the group. It's the group that is the final authority. And this is such a wonderful thing. You know, it spares us so much personalization and acrimony and back and forth because it's the group that makes the decision. So I would urge you all to keep this in mind. And there's another way this can be used shortly, which we'll show you. Now notice that the chair doesn't have to say point of order because the chair already has the duty of maintaining order and decorum. So the chair just needs to take appropriate action. They can say it, but they don't have to. And what is the role of the chair? Robert says, it is the duty of the presiding officer to enforce the rules relating to debate and those relating to order and decorum within the assembly. So this is a duty. This is a duty that the chair has. And the chair is subject to the same rules. If the chair breaks one of the rules, a member may raise a point of order, and the chair rules on their own behavior, which seems odd, but that's the way the system works. So that's something you members who are not chairs need to know. Now, I want to mention a pitfall about point of order. Don't weaponize it. You may interrupt to make a point of order, and sometimes you have to. If a commissioner, I was watching a city council meeting in Yakima some years ago, where the commission, one of the city council members said, I think it's terrible that the commissioners on this city voted against this resolution. Why, you, commissioner, are a woman veteran and you should have been in favor, and you are Jewish. Why didn't you vote for this? She was making all sorts of personal comments, which were completely inappropriate. For that, in that case, yes, you should have interrupted and made a point of order. But usually it's not necessary to interrupt and you should hold back. And one of the useful tools that I recommend to you is to have a piece of paper that says point of order. If something's being said that you think isn't right, you can raise this up, and then the chair knows to call on you when the speech is over, but doesn't have to interrupt. You know, interrupting is so emotionally disruptive. It really throws everybody off balance. So if you can avoid it, it's a good idea. It's up to you. It's up to you. But one of the key things I have found is points of order about whether something is relevant, whether something is germane. On one city council, one council member would say something like this: I don't think we should approve the transportation improvement program because the needs of the homeless are much more important. And somebody would immediately interrupt and say, point of order, the needs of the homeless are not germane. They're not relevant to this discussion. Well, I think that's a mistake. You know, let people make their argument. Let people bring forward the points that they think are important. Now, obviously, if they're going to be telling you about their honeymoon in Peru, okay, you know, that's a whole different story. But in general, there can be genuine differences of opinion. So you could agree among yourselves that you won't interrupt each other to make a point of order pertaining to germaneness. That's an option for you. Rather, you can raise that point of order at the conclusion of the speech, and then the chair will issue the ruling. That's one way to deal with it. Another case, a city council where a new member said, well, I think in order to deal with this, we'd have to pass another ordinance. And the mayor interrupted her and said, another ordinance isn't relevant. Well, I don't think that was right. Let her make her point there. Now, once the chair has issued a ruling, there is no more discussion or debate on the matter. You can't discuss it anymore. The only allowable discussion is to appeal the ruling. We feel that appeal is the most important motion in all of Robert's rules and the least known. And I have the feeling that although I mentioned it last year, somehow it didn't take root among you. So I really want to bring this to your attention. The chair enforces order and decorum, but the group is the final authority. Any two members can appeal a ruling of the chair. One member appeals and one seconds the appeal. Now, the exception is if the ruling is a matter of fact on which there can't be two interpretations, the ruling cannot be appealed. So let's have an example of appealing a point of order.
The port was a cesspool of corruption.
Point of order.
State your point.
That comment breaks our rules of decorum.
The point is well taken. Members may not use this term.
Appeal.
Second. Very well, the ruling of the chair has been appealed and seconded. The members will decide the matter. The question is whether the chair's ruling that the words cesspool of corruption break our rules of decorum should be sustained. All those who believe it should be sustained, please say aye. All those who believe it should not be sustained, please say no. In this instance, the members voted no, so the ruling of the chair was not sustained. I've put this unhappy figure in just for fun, but in fact, if you lose an appeal, it's better to maintain a neutral face. Try to give the impression that you don't care.
The port.
So I quickly want to say that that is a real life example, but it was the Port of Seattle that was being referred to. So I don't want to be saying something that might be misapplied here. So the chair has to be very careful in explaining the vote to the members because the basic principle is the chair's ruling stands until it's overturned. See, this is different from before. Before, I was suggesting that you ask the group to make the decision. In this example, the chair has made a ruling and it stands unless it's overturned. So the question being voted on is, shall the decision of the chair be sustained? Shall the decision of the chair be sustained? It kind of seems counterintuitive. It's confusing. It takes a negative vote for the appeal to win. So if there's a majority vote in favor of sustaining the chair's ruling or a tie, the chair's ruling stands. And the chair may vote on the appeal. So in your case, it's going to take two people voting against sustaining the chair's ruling for the appeal to succeed. So it goes like this. Appeal, second. The chair says the chair's ruling has been appealed and seconded. The members will decide. All those who believe the ruling should be sustained, please say aye. Members in favor say aye. All those who believe the ruling should not be sustained, please say no. No. And then the chair issues the results. The ayes have it and the ruling is sustained, or the noes have it and the ruling is not sustained. So this is really important. I saw in your various meetings cases where there was some disagreement about what the chair had done. So you've got this tool, you've got appeal in order to turn the matter over to the commission as a whole. Now, point of order is made by one member, but an appeal needs a second. Appeals pertaining to decorum or the order of business cannot be debated. I think that's a great rule. You know, if we could argue about whether a word is insulting or not, we'd be there all night. When an appeal can be debated, the process is different from anything else in Robert's rules. So if you get into that realm, you'll want to study it up a little bit. And point of order and appeal are processed immediately. No other business can take place until they are dealt with. Now, the chair can correct erroneous statements. If an erroneous statement is made, if a commissioner says, you know, last year when we passed that ordinance, and in fact we defeated it, the chair has the authority and the responsibility of correcting it. And if the commissioner disagrees, he or she can appeal the chair's statement. Statements by the chair can be appealed as well. So we believe that point of order and appeal are the heart of democracy. They are just critical to the way in which the group is the final authority. And we encourage you to refine your use of point of order and to develop your use of appeal when necessary. Now, the third portion here is request for information or point of information. And this is a question. The chair should respond, state your question. And then the chair can answer himself or herself or turn to the executive director. So here's an example. The commissioner says, request for information, chair. The chair says, state your question. Is it correct that the sum total of income from this project is estimated to be XXX million dollars? And the chair replies, yes, that is correct. Or the chair turns to the executive director. Would the executive director take this question, please? So the question goes to the chair. It's not being asked of somebody else, but the chair can pass it on. And there's it's really useful to have this tool in your kit here. I just want to also say that there's no such thing as point of clarification. People sometimes say point of clarification, and what they mean is they want to explain something. Well, explaining something is debate. So you want to clarify when your turn comes. And let me also mention that all these ones that I'm talking about here do not count against your turn in debate. All these motions, these procedural motions, don't count against your turn. Point of parliamentary inquiry is a request about how to do something. Commissioner says, Chair, I have a point of parliamentary inquiry. The chair says, state your question. The commissioner says, when may I make an appeal from the ruling of the chair? And the chair replies, the appeal must be made immediately at the time of the ruling. So if you're not sure about something or where we are in the process, you can always raise a point of parliamentary inquiry. So that's the that section on procedural motions. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that? Commissioner Downing.
Thank you, Anne. So we've had our share of point of orders over the last couple of years or several years, whatever. But I would say less and less, you know, as these particular three commissioners get used to working together. But I would say that, so when we have public comment, there's two circumstances where I can't speak for my fellow commissioners, but where I've maybe drawn a point of order. And I guess emotionally, it's hard to wait to the end of the 3 minutes. You talk about not interrupting a speaker. And I can remember one speaker, and I realized that decorum and offensive remarks, which is part of decorum, is a variable thing depending on who you are. For example, if someone were to compare me to the past administration in Washington, D.C., you know, I would take offense to that. And so are you saying that, are you making a blanket statement that it's good not to interrupt a public comment in the middle of a public comment if you think that the nature of their comments are, you know, objectionable and against our policy of decorum?
I'm not saying that, no. All these things that I'm talking about here pertain to your meetings and you three debating and discussing among yourselves. Everything in this section is of benefit and value to you as a member. Public comment is a whole nother animal.
Oh,
public comment is a whole nother animal, and we will talk about that when we get to the inappropriate remarks in the next section.
Thank you. I'll hold my.
It's a great question, and I'll bring it up then. Commissioner Zita. You're muted, Commissioner Zita.
I really appreciate your review, Anne, and I am grateful that you took a look at our meetings to figure out which are the things that would be most useful for us. And I think these will be useful for us. I think we need a parliamentarian to help us while we're getting used to figuring out how to use these. I believe that our legal counsel has someone on staff who's a parliamentarian, but that gets expensive. So while we are getting better at doing this, what do you recommend as far as having a parliamentarian on hand to advise us, a neutral person?
Oh, I think it's a great idea. And parliamentarians charge far less than attorneys, in my experience. This is not a service that I offer myself, but I have some very excellent colleagues whom I can recommend if you'd like to look for bids. And of course, it makes it easy with Zoom. And I think it's wonderful. I think it really helps. Thank you.
I think
for the
that would be
question.
useful for us if commissioners would consider that. Maybe we can talk about it later.
Very good. Thank you. Yes, Sam.
You have mentioned when that point of order is for when rules are a rule is broken, and in particular, I think you mean rules of decorum. So could you review those? I didn't see a slide where it's like, inflammatory language, things like that.
Coming right up.
Okay.
Next section.
Like,
So any other questions about the procedural motions? Okay, so let's talk about inappropriate remarks. So it's a fundamental principle of parliamentary procedure that debate must be germane, relevant to the topic at hand. And certain kinds of remarks are inappropriate because they're not relevant to the discussion. So we get to our next fundamental guideline: courtesy and respect are required at all times. So there are 5 types of remarks that are inappropriate for public bodies. The first is personal remarks about other members, with the exception of conflict of interest. And of course, I'm sure that you have your standard guidelines for conflict of interest. The second is discourteous remarks, insulting language and attacks, obscenity, vulgarity. The third is inflammatory language. I always love the example of Winston Churchill. He referred to something as a lie and he was called to order. And he said, "Very well, I will say instead that the member is guilty of terminological inexactitude." So you can say that something's wrong. You can say that you disagree. The actual Robertian phrase is, "I believe that there is strong evidence that the member is mistaken." You can say that, but you can't use the word lie. And of course, we have plenty of inflammatory words right now that are just going to throw us right up the wall if we use them. So I'm not going to say them, you know them. The fourth one is criticizing past actions of the group, with 2 exceptions, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And the last one, the big umbrella, is remarks that are not germane, that are not relevant to the discussion. So this is the paper I'll send you, Inappropriate Remarks on Local Government Councils, that goes into them in detail. So during the meeting, commissioners have a duty to be polite to their colleagues, staff, and everyone else. This is part of their fiduciary duty of obedience to the goals of the organization. So let's have an example of one of these inappropriate remarks.
You're only saying that because you're a banker.
So that is a personal remark. And Robert says very clearly, the measure, not the member, is the subject of debate. We're talking about our proposed action, not about individuals. And I think this is a great rule and a very important one. And a useful tip for you all, somebody gave me this. It's not original, but this person said, he tells his group, the focus of our meeting is words on paper. The focus of our meeting is words on paper. Focus on the motions and not on the people who make the motions. And we certainly recommend that commissioners take this approach outside the meeting also. Focus on actions taken and do not criticize colleagues outside the meeting. We have some cities, where people are blowing up their social media accounts with calling their fellow city council members racist. And that doesn't help anybody. That just makes the situation for their community much worse. Now, I want to mention the rule that you may not criticize past actions, but there are 2 exceptions. If the body as a whole is discussing the matter, then it's fine to criticize it. And if the member plans to introduce a motion to rescind or amend the motion at the end of their speech, then you can. And members may not criticize the body as a whole. So I'm just, again, going to give a couple of examples here.
Building that skateboard park was the worst thing we ever did.
So you can't say that. You can't say that just at random. But you can say this.
Building that skateboard park was the worst thing we ever did. and I move we tear it down.
You see the difference? You can criticize if it's preparatory to making a motion that's going to rescind or amend the action. But just random critiquing is not allowed, which I think is a great thing. And then we get to the last one, remarks that are not germane. So discussion must be relevant to the topic at hand. And of course, you want to be reasonable about this as per previous slides. So this ties into our fundamental guideline of one thing at a time. Robert is very linear. Very linear. We're just going to take one thing at a time. We can't go randomly off on tangents. So this is a great tip for the chair. Members will kindly keep their remarks strictly to the topic under discussion. I love it because to me, the word kindly is the iron fist in the velvet glove. You know, members will kindly keep their remarks strictly to the topic under discussion. Again, you're not saying, John, I think you're off topic. You're making that generic statement for the members as a whole. Now, this is speaking to Commissioner Downing's point. We are speaking here about discussion within commission meetings among the members of the commission. These prohibitions do not apply to the public when they are giving public comment. They don't apply. The public can basically say anything it wants. The public can say that you are, you know, Alex Zimmerman, I don't know if you ever see him. He's a guy who keeps running for office, and he goes to many, many City Council of Seattle meetings and committee meetings, and he gets up and says, you are fascist murderers, you're Nazis, all these very offensive things. You have to stand there and take it. You cannot stop a member of the public from making offensive remarks. Now, the courts have found that you can limit the time, place, and manner of public comment. Time, place, and manner, as long as those are viewpoint neutral, that you're not favoring one viewpoint over another. But the key point, the key point is that the public may not disrupt the meeting, and the courts have found that mere words don't constitute disruption. So in Santa Cruz, a member of the public was standing in the back and giving the Nazi salute all through the meeting. And that was found to be acceptable First Amendment public comment. Yes, Commissioner Zita.
What if someone makes a physical threat to a commissioner during a meeting?
Well, that's where I think you want to talk to your attorney.
We now have a provision in our rules that is one type of behavior that is not permitted. It constitutes disruptive behavior.
I think you've got to talk to your attorney. I mean, another point that comes up is libel. Somebody asked me about a planning commission meeting where a member of the public was attacking another citizen and making all sorts of statements about him. I thought maybe they could deal with that under the topic of relevance, that it wasn't relevant to the planning commission's work, but you'll have to talk to your attorney. I really can't advise on this now. And just to mention, I do have two good papers on the website. One is Guidelines for Public Comment, and one is a brilliant paper by Brett Vincent, who was the attorney in Sumner, and it's called Danger Will Robinson about public comment. Those are both available for free download. So they will give you some good ideas. But we even have the case in, and I will take your question, in the city of Port Angeles, where the hapless deputy mayor was running the public comment session, and somebody compared her and the three other commissioners to the four horsemen of the apocalypse. They were talking about fluoridation, you know. So she adjourned the meeting. Well, she later got censured for saying, she said she felt like it was getting riotous, but it wasn't physical danger. So this is where you want your attorney. It's above my pay grade. Sam.
And to that and I know that the WPPA has had some sessions on this, and Schmelik, Sitkin, and Davis has a training program on how to establish and uphold the community standards for public comments. And so if the commission would wish additional training and information about this, I'm happy to arrange that. I think that they, my understanding is that they maintain that so long as you are upholding a widely accepted community standard, there's some things that you can do. But again, you know, at the commission's discretion, and if you'd like for me arrange for that additional legal training, I can absolutely do that.
Well, I'd be interested too, because I'm not sure about community standards. Joe?
So again, with public comment, you know, we have a policy, and I don't know what paragraph, but it says that public comments shall be directed toward the commission. So I can't speak for my fellow commissioners. So I interpret that as when one member of the public gets up to speak, we like them to not reference another member of the public. So if Jane gets up there and says something, and then Tom gets up right after her and says, you know, I totally disagree with what Jane said, you know, blah, 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 you know, and so is that free speech also? And should we just let that go?
Talk to your
Even
attorney.
though we have a policy?
Talk to your attorney. Talk to your attorney.
Okay.
I can't tell you.
And Sam, what was the training that you had recommended? I want to capture that as something that we might consider, it sounds like.
What was, is it a firm, a law firm?
It's training that's been given at the WPPA in various venues, the Washington Public Ports Association, by the firm Schmelik, Sitkin, and Davis, or CSD.
Okay, so we'll bring that back up.
Glad to know they're out there.
Yeah, and just to let you know, we've got 10 minutes left.
Very good. Before our break. Thank you. All right, so I just want to quickly talk about virtual meeting etiquette. This is a whole new arena for us. You know, a year ago, we didn't have to think about this, but now we do all the time. So I just want to offer a few suggestions. I think it's really important for commissioners to leave their video camera on during the entire meeting, unless it's necessary to leave briefly for an urgent matter, which should happen rarely. And this ensures that every commissioner is present and is seen to be present. When some commissioners frequently turn their video off, it leads to questions about their participation. It's discourteous to other commissioners and staff, and it casts a negative shadow on the other commissioners and staff present, since it seems that the absent commissioner is lurking. Now, I know that this is hard. You know, there's a lot of information now about how exhausting it is to be constantly on display like this. But the alternative is to kind of recede into the shadows and raise questions that it's better not to raise. Commissioners who must leave the meeting will announce their departure and return. They should always be very clear about that. They should maintain a professional appearance. Commissioners will refrain from improper body language, facial expressions, or other nonverbal lack of courtesy. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of the Gottmans at the University of Washington. They have couples come and they videotape them in their interactions. They claim that they can tell from a 2-minute video who's going to get divorced or not. And one of the most telling signs is rolling your eyes. If they're rolling their eyes at each other, that's a real sign of contempt. So you don't want to have that on your video camera. Refrain from holding up documents. Commissioners will refrain from holding up any document to the screen when they do not have the floor, since this amounts to interrupting the speaker. So that, just a few thoughts there about video etiquette. Any questions on video meeting etiquette? I'm going to have to write a whole new blog entry on this, I think. Yes, Commissioner Zita.
It's interesting to hear that perspective about cameras, because other groups formally request that people turn off their cameras when they're not presenting to avoid distracting movement in the background. So as long as we are clear about what our expectations together are, that's good. Different groups have different expectations.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. And then as to displaying things, I have a question that maybe we will discuss later. Currently, when commissioners provide information, for example, in a meeting packet, we are not able to display that packet information in the meeting. And
I'm going to talk about that.
that's great. We do need to talk about that. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to suggest, Holly, if it's okay, that we take our break here for 10 minutes and then return to elected commissioner role and authority. So we'd be back at 2:20, if that's okay. Can't hear you.
Any concerns with going that direction, taking our break now?
I think we need it. I think breaks are important.
I think we're ready. So we'll see everybody back here at 2:20.
Wait a sec. Commissioner McGregor has his hand up. Yes.
Can we lurk now?
Yes. Now you can lurk.
Okay.
Turn your cameras off. It's all fine.
We're gonna have some dinosaur play while you're lurking. Okay, everybody. Just your help with calling on people. I don't know why, but I can't see everybody, so I'm like toddling up and down. But I think between the two of us, we're getting.
I hope so. Yeah, we're getting people. And if we really miss you, you can just jump in.
Okay.
All right. So elected commissioner role and authority. So, I know you all know this, but this is Jurassic Parliament's take. So what is your individual power? We know that legislation is the prerogative of the commission. The executive director supports the commission, but does not decide. Administration is the prerogative of the executive director, and the commission may not interfere. This is a continuing issue. MRSC is running a webinar tomorrow on separation of powers that's just going to talk about precisely this problem. So I want to go a little bit back in time and call up a different hero, not dinosaur, not quite as far back as that, but I want to mention Batman. So did any of you ever see the Batman movies or the TV series? You remember how Batman is always interacting with the commissioner, the police commissioner, the commish? So that was the Galveston Plan, which was developed in 1901, where there were city commissioners who had the administrative responsibility of a certain area in their hands. And gradually it shifted to the strong mayor and council, which became much more prominent from the 1920s on. And then that gradually shifted to the council manager system. And now approximately 60% of US cities have a council manager. And I'm sure it was the same thing with the port. Ports initially were run by people who did the work of the port. And your executive director pointed out to me that county commissions originally were county road commissions. Their duty was to manage the roads. So it all has that origin in the very admirable wish and desire of citizens to serve their community by doing the work. But over time, we've shifted to a system where there's a division of power. There's a separation of powers. So commissioners may not do the work of the port. Commissioners may not do the work of the port. Elected officials care deeply about their port. Sometimes they have special knowledge and expertise. They may make suggestions to the executive director, but they may not do the work of the port themselves. They can't cross the line between legislation and administration. And this is a legal requirement. I'm not making this up, as they say. When people get elected to public office, often they're surprised at how little power they have. An individual commissioner may not have a staff member fired, direct staff, oversee employee work product, or interfere in administration. So you have to know the limits of your role, and I'm sure you do, but you are policymakers, not movers and shakers. So you may debate and vote on the overall strategy to be followed. You may suggest amendments to legislation to achieve the goals of the port. You may not get involved in the details of planning programs or administering the legislation. This is the task of the executive director and the staff. So you as a commissioner, you must keep the executive director apprised of staff contacts. It is appropriate to copy the executive director on emails to staff. You shouldn't be doing end runs. Don't prepare materials for the port. Don't do it. This violates the defined authority and role that you have accepted in taking up office. It crosses boundaries that may incur legal liability, and it confuses the staff and the public. You just shouldn't be doing it. Supplemental materials are dangerous. In this age of rapid fire transmission and social media, for the commissioners to prepare their own materials creates an unfortunate possibility of misinformation and even possibly disinformation, as we saw in the city of Kenmore, where they had a CPA who brightly prepared his own financial analyses, which mimicked very closely the financial analyses of the city and which were very, very destructive. So if you as a commission insist upon preparing materials, although this is a poor practice, the disclaimer that the materials do not represent the position of the port must be prominently displayed, and those materials must be sent timely to the staff in accord with your guidelines. I believe it's 3 p.m. on the Thursday previous. And it's the staff that prepare the PowerPoints. The commissioners should not be preparing PowerPoints. That is interfering. That is interfering in the administration of the port, in our view. You have to leave that to the staff. Your duty as a commissioner is to debate and determine overall strategy, policy, and legislation for the port, and leave the details of operations to the executive director and the staff. Now, I know this is a hard saying, and I suffered it myself. I have an example. When I was president of the American Translators Association, it was my duty to review all denials of certification to see that the process had been followed. And a case came to me of a Russian to English translator who had failed the exam. I opened the packet and I read it through, and I thought, this is not a fail. This guy should have passed, because I was a Russian to English translator at that time. But I didn't have the right to say to the commission, you should pass this guy. That would have been doing the work of the certification commission. That would have been interference. And you don't have the right to interfere. You are usurping the staff's tasks when you do that. I remind you of this wonderful quote from the Standard Code. All members of a governing board share in a joint and collective authority. A joint and collective authority which exists and can be exercised only when the group is in session. So you have 3 fiduciary duties as defined by law: the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, and the duty of obedience. A commissioner has the duty of exercising the diligence a reasonable person would use in carrying out his or her duties. A commissioner has the duty of furthering the interests of the port as established by majority rule, and may not take action to undermine or harm its moral stance or business interests. A commissioner has the duty of obeying the agreed upon rules and guidelines established by the port. A commissioner may propose changes to those rules, but is bound by the rules until they are changed. So we recommend a brief yearly review of your procedures and practices, not more frequently than that. I know of one city that says no more than once a year, and some only do it every 2 years. Establishing them and sticking with them will help you do your work better. And obviously this is an opportunity, this retreat and these trainings that we're having. Now, what about when you oppose the decision? Up until the vote, discussion is vigorous and varied. Once the vote is taken, it's a whole different ballgame. When serving on a public body, members have a duty to uphold the decision of that body, even if they disagree with it. They may express their disagreement in public, but may not attempt to undermine the decision. And of course, they're free to try to persuade their colleagues during the meeting to change the decision within certain limits. So this is another new paper. Lost the vote? Don't sabotage the council's action. So I will be sending this to you, and it gives some examples of undermining of situations where we believe members of local government bodies acted improperly. Commissioners may not overstep their authority in outside communications. When contacting other official bodies or making public statements, commissioners must be in touch with and inform the executive director and their fellow commissioners. To do otherwise violates your fiduciary duties. The alternative is chaos, confusion, and dissipation of the port's authority and waste of public resources. You have very limited time together, and you have to spend it on your true tasks. I also want to mention the First Amendment. When a person is elected to public office, they give up some of their First Amendment rights for a higher purpose. And this principle has been confirmed in our courts. And the essential principle here that I keep hammering on and keep coming back to is majority rule. Majority rule is all we've got. If we don't stick to that, then as a society, we're just done for. So any questions or comments on this portion? Yes, Commissioner Zita.
Will you please go back to those 3 duties?
Yes.
Where do those 3 duties come from?
They're part of common law that have been established in the courts.
When we take our oath of office, we swear duty to the state of Washington's Constitution. That includes a duty of care or fiduciary responsibility, but loyalty and obedience are not part of the oath that we take as elected officials. And in particular, the duty of loyalty to the port is superseded by the Open Public Meetings Act, which expressly states that the people do not give up their right to elected officials to decide what is good for them to know or not.
So I see that that's perfectly in harmony with the duty of loyalty. How do you see that it's a conflict, Commissioner Zita?
It's necessary for elected officials to have adequate information to make decisions that that serve the people. I'm going to read from the Washington State Supreme Court decision of July 2017.
You may do so.
Let's see if I can find that. Oops.
While you're doing it, I will just advance, if I may, to the duty of loyalty.
Yeah.
I said that a commissioner has the duty of furthering the interests of the port and may not take action to undermine or harm its moral stance or business interests. So I personally don't see any conflict with that and the Open Meetings Act.
So you talk about the duty of the commission, and the Washington Public Ports Association has a really nice presentation that they give new commissioners on the duty of commissioners and the duty of, for example, executive directors. And they agree with you that we should know our boundaries and stay within our boundaries, that commissioners should not be trying to do the day-to-day operations of the port. And in order to do our legislative duty and meet our fiduciary responsibilities, one of the key things that commissioners need is information from port staff. Can you speak to that?
Surely, but before I do, let me ask. I'm still confused about how, in your view, the duty of loyalty conflicts with the Open Meetings Act. What does that mean exactly?
So our primary duty is to the people of Washington State and to the taxpayers.
Yes.
Since taxpayers support the port.
Yes.
And loyalty to the port may not always be consistent with our duty of fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers. There are situations where those can come into conflict. And when there is a question, we are required by the oath that we took as public servants to put our fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers of Washington State first.
So I would certainly suggest that if you have a specific instance in mind, that you consult with your attorney, because I don't think this can be addressed as a generic question.
Well,
I don't see anything here to do with the Open Meetings Act. I really don't. I mean, maybe I'm being obtuse.
May I comment?
Yes, please.
Thanks, Ann, and thank you, Commissioner Zita. So when it says a commissioner has the duty of furthering the interests of the port, I mean, I take that to mean in the context of the Port Commission, which is the majority rule and the votes that we take, that expresses the interest of the port and that we support that, and we don't act to undermine, as it says later, don't act to undermine that, which is to, like you say, talk poorly of a decision that's been made by the Port Commission. And I would say that in my reading, that is where we're going with the duty of loyalty. I mean, the commission can guide this port in any direction as a whole. And once we do that, that's what's to be supported. And I think that's where the loyalty comes in. That's my view of this statement.
And I did not intend to say that a commissioner may not speak against a decision. I think it's perfectly fine for a commissioner to express their views if they disagree with the decision that has been made. That's a very clearly established First Amendment right for government officials. Sometimes it can be a question where the line is between expressing disagreement and undermining. I'll give you an example, if I may. So in the city of Anchorage, the school board passed a bond, and a member of the school board took out an editorial in the newspaper urging citizens to vote against the bond. So in my view, he was violating his duty of loyalty to the school board. And he should have been censured for doing that. He could have said, if someone asked him, do you support this? That's fine, to give an honest answer. But to campaign against the board's decision, in my view, is a violation. It's not appropriate. So there are fine distinctions here, and I very much appreciate your commitment, Commissioner Zita, to the duty to the taxpayers. And I think that if it comes down to those fine distinctions, it's really good to get a legal opinion on it, if I may say so. Yes, I'll take Jerry and then Commissioner Zita.
So I'm just wondering, in that example, and Anchorage, so if a council member or whoever it was a board member of the school district, then was putting out, the stuff on their social media or whatever, or, an article in the paper, how did the board then manage that? I mean, so is that brought then to a board meeting for discussion about them doing that, or how?
So that's a great question. I don't know what they did, but a body, the commission, the school board, does have the right to sanction its members, and we're going to talk about that. Commissioner Zita?
I found the quote I was looking for, and this is from the Washington State Supreme Court decision of July 2017, ruling for the Columbia River Keepers against the Port of Vancouver. It was a landmark decision that has impacts on all ports. The legislature, the Supreme Court cites law in upholding their decision. The legislature finds and declares that all public commissions exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. It is the intent of this chapter that their actions be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly. The people of this state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people, in delegating authority, do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created.
Absolutely. Bravo, and more power to them. And again, I see that as entirely consistent with the message that I'm offering today. Any other further comments or thoughts about this? Yes, Commissioner Downing.
Thank you. Can you move to, I think it's slide 114, please?
So the numbering might be a little different. What was it about?
It was commissioners talking to other bodies.
Yes. Commissioners may not overstep their authority in outside communications.
Well, what does that exactly mean? In other words, you know, there's a wide spectrum between a commissioner having a conversation with an individual city council member of, let's say, one of our cities, or, you know, appearing in person before another entire city council. So, you know, that's kind of a continuum. So I'm looking for a little bit more clarification.
Well, you're right. And in fact, this is too broad. This statement as made is too broad. But so I will have to change it. And it's when a commissioner is speaking in a way that can be taken as representing the entire commission.
Okay.
That's the concern. So I will modify that, and I thank you for bringing it to my attention. We know that people don't, they see you as in all your aura, you know, in all your power. They probably overimagine your power, but when you go and speak officially, people think that you're an official. Commissioner Zita.
This topic came up last year in our retreat, and I'm pleased that all three commissioners, as far as I know, now have disclaimers on their email, like the one that I put on my email 4 years ago saying, I don't speak for the commission.
Good to hear. Further comments? Anybody? Okay, so this is a tough topic. I know. I'm doing my best, and I thank you for your helping me to refine the message and make it better. So now we're going to cover a bunch of other topics, which include the ones that were brought up right at the beginning. So first I want to talk about adopting and enforcing common guidelines. So, you know, we don't like the idea that guidelines must be enforced. We would rather that everybody would just do the right thing of their own accord. But all human organizations, even benign institutions like hospitals, schools, and retirement communities, ultimately depend on power enforcement for their success. It's just a sad fact of human nature. So the power of the group extends to the power to sanction. It's best if commission rules of procedure include specific steps to be taken when the guidelines are broken. But even if they don't, if Robert's Rules is your authority, you have this power already. Now, don't do this lightly. Use sanctions only when repeated offenses make it necessary, and consult with your attorney before proceeding. So these are some of the actions we've seen that may merit sanction. Failing to offer courtesy and respect using foul language, failing to observe the rules of discussion, interrupting others, speaking out of turn, speaking beyond established time limits, violating the confidentiality of executive session, that's also a legal violation, failing to observe ethics guidelines, taking actions outside the meeting that hamper the board in its work, and taking actions outside the meeting that attempt to undermine a board decision. So there are a lot of possible sanctions. There's verbal admonishment, a letter of reprimand, a motion of censure. The member may vote on their own censure motion unless they're under disciplinary proceedings, removal from external or board committees, and being ordered to leave the meeting at which the behavior occurs. That's pretty extreme. That's the nuclear option. To talk to your attorney before you try that. And of course, you can't bar an elected official from future meetings. So again, I'm going to give you a little skit just as an example of what this might look like.
Jack Robinson has repeatedly violated our rules of procedure and uses insulting language towards his colleagues and the public. I move that Jack Robinson be issued a verbal admonishment and directed to cease his inappropriate behavior.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that Jack Robinson be issued a verbal admonishment and directed to cease his inappropriate behavior. Is there any discussion?
This has gone on too long. At every meeting, Jack Robinson calls his colleagues bozos and describes the public as the great unwashed.
You people are all too sensitive. I'm just using humor to lighten things up a bit. This motion's a bunch of malarkey.
Well, I agree with the motion. I'm sick and tired of all this nonsense.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. All those in favor of the motion to issue a verbal admonishment to Jack Robinson and direct him to cease his inappropriate behavior, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. Jack Robinson, you are hereby admonished for your inappropriate and disruptive use of language during our meetings. Kindly cease such behavior immediately and observe our rules of decorum.
Jack Robinson.
So you can see that a censure like that, it has no teeth. You know, it's not like a fine or something, but it is an expression of disapproval on the part of the body. I was amused to discover I was reading something about the English Civil War in the 17th century. And at one point, Parliament issued something called a declaration of dislike. So I thought, well, that's really what a censure is. It's a declaration of dislike. But here's an example where a body really did make a difference. This is from the excerpt from the City Council minutes of the City of Tacoma. Move that the council issue a written reprimand to Councilman Tom Stinger, remove him from his duties, and place him on probation as to his appointments. The proposed action is based on Councilman Stinger's transgression of the council rules, specifically for his discourteous conduct at the last meeting of the Neighborhoods and Housing Committee, which involved repeated derogatory remarks directed toward a member of the public and failing to come to order at the request of the presiding officer. This guy was using the F word to everybody, members of the staff, members of the public, fellow council members, and they brought him in line. They were able to do it. So you can if you have to. And so I'm going to send this paper, Sanctioning Rogue Board Members, that will give you a discussion about how you can handle this and different options. Let's talk about commission to staff direction. So if an individual commissioner wants the staff to do something, the chair must make sure that the commission agrees by taking a vote. Now, when I was in first grade, I came home one day and said to my mother, I had been appointed to the student council for the elementary school, what's all this vote, vote, vote business? In that case, it was a good question because the principal had prepared the outcomes of our votes ahead of time and presented them to the student council. So I had good reason to be skeptical. You may feel that I'm telling you, especially Chair Downing, you know, vote, vote, vote. What's all this vote business? But you just have to do it. The commission as a whole has the responsibility of giving clarity to the staff. Don't float an idea and expect the staff to make it concrete. Similarly, if you need more information, don't say the staff can research this. If you would like the staff to research something, make a motion. I move that the staff be directed to research all reports of UFOs received by the FAA in Pierce County. And then we're going to have second discussion and vote. So this is the way that you can keep those lines going between you and the staff. I want to talk about agendas. So if the commission wishes to consider an item on a future agenda, take a vote to do so. Leave the details of when the item will be taken up and at which kind of meeting to the president and the executive director's discretion. To do otherwise is to interfere with the staff's responsibility of weighing all its duties and using its capacity to the best of staff ability. So this is what we strongly recommend. Sure, you can say we want to tackle this in the future and take a vote on it, but don't say when. Now, I know that you are able to add items to the agenda on the day of the meeting, which we don't recommend in the interest of transparency and general efficiency. So if it's critical to follow the agreed upon timeline for preparing and distributing the agenda, if at a meeting itself, the commissioners do vote to add something to an agenda at that meeting, no materials can go with it because you're just going to impede transparency and disrupt the orderly process of the commission. Let's look at minutes. So I want to distinguish among some confusing terms: records, minutes, transcripts, documents, and reports. Try to see if we can get some clarity here. And again, this is new ground for me, so I'll be grateful if you see something that should be clarified. What are records? Well, public records include any written documents pertaining to the port's work. That's emails, texts, Word documents, PDFs, PowerPoints, everything that you have as part of your business is a public record. Within that realm, there are 3 official records of commission meetings: written minutes as approved by the commission, the record of public hearings, which are written, and your video recordings. Those are the official records of the commission. Now, these are other materials: staff reports, consultant reports, transcripts, other documentation. The commission does not vote to approve them. Reports and materials like that are simply received for filing. Robert says don't vote to approve them. And the reason is that voting to approve a report or to accept a report means that you endorse the entire contents of the report. This happens to the city of Bar Harbor, Maine. They appointed a citizen committee, and the committee spent 6 months deciding what to do about the tourist industry in Bar Harbor. They prepared an excellent report. They gave it to the city council. The city council voted to approve it and then did nothing of what was included. And people were really upset. They said, if you approve this, how come you're not doing it? So you as a commission don't vote on any of these materials. You don't vote on them at all. Now, on March 23rd, 2020, I looked at your minutes, and the approved minutes show that no vote was taken to approve including public comment in the minutes. In my view, there's no further action required with regard to these minutes. The fact that one commissioner recalls the matter differently does not affect the outcome. However, you are free to vote to require including public comment in the minutes now, if you desire. We don't recommend it, but you can do it. Commissioner Zita. You're muted.
On April 13th, 2 commissioners agreed to this, and I am prepared to show you that agreement.
Did the commission at its April 13th meeting vote to amend the minutes of the previous meeting?
On April 13th, 2 commissioners agreed to include written public comments in meeting minutes.
So I haven't seen those minutes. I haven't seen April 13th.
Yeah, it's not clear that the minutes include that, but I can show you the video where this happened, and I have it pulled up if you would like, if you are willing to take 1 minute to see this.
You know, Commissioner Zita, I don't think it's necessary, frankly. I think the point is, what do you want to do now? What does the commission want to do now? Do you want to take a vote to approve requiring public comment in the minutes? Then do so. I mean, and you can also, if you decide to do so, you can vote to amend the minutes of April 13th if you feel that they did show that. But I don't think it's a good use of my time or our time for me to be viewing that. The official minutes should reflect the actions taken. If there's evidence that's agreed upon by a majority of the commission that they don't, then amend those minutes. You can certainly amend them. But I think
agree that the minutes should reflect the action taken. And that is a chronic concern that we still deal with.
Well, then it's the commission that has to deal with it. And you can move as a commissioner. We're going to cover shortly the ways to change something previously done. So I'll talk about how to do that. Commissioner McGregor.
I just want to point out that on the April 13th, while it was agreed upon, there was no vote taken. There was no decision.
Thank you.
And it showed, and it reflects that in the discussion we had on page 2 of those minutes that we approved as the minutes of that meeting.
Thank you.
That's what it reflects.
So in my view, this really isn't the issue. The issue is, what do you want to do about it now? What do you want to do about it now?
Well, I agree that is part of the question, and it's an important question. What do we want to do now? But two important related questions are, how do we ensure accuracy in our minutes and our transcripts? And who makes decisions like this, the commission or the staff? And those are questions that I think are not, we have 7 minutes left, and I doubt if they're going to be answered today.
We have more than 7 minutes. We're going till 3:30, as I understand it. Holly, is that right?
All right then. Great. Maybe we will discuss it today. Great.
So I suggest that we complete my presentation, and then Holly has been keeping a list of questions that have come up and points, and you all can decide and discuss among you. Yes, Sam?
I think this brings up the point as the difference between a perceived agreement and an action. And you spoke to this earlier of while the commission may perceive that they have reached agreement about something, if there's not actually a motion taken and a vote that is recorded, then staff's not going to pick up on that. And so I want to be clear that that's not staff being obstinate. It's not in any way. It's just we pay attention to, it was there a motion and was there a vote, and so I think that, to reinforce that idea that the action is not the discussion that happened and any perceived agreement or consensus that is reached. It is whether a motion is taken and a vote and a majority of vote that occurred.
Thank you. That's absolutely my position. That's certainly what I'm recommending. Now let's look at September 28th. So on that date, the minutes show that no decision was taken. The executive director included a transcript prepared from GoToMeeting in the October 7th packet. Now notice that we do not recommend using this service in future, as the speech recognition technology is inadequate. That transcript is not part of the meeting minutes, the official record of the September 28th meeting. It was simply informational. If the transcript was confusing and a vote that was taken that was grounded in that confusion, you can move now to rescind that vote. That's certainly something you can do, and we'll show you how later. But again, in my view, this is not an issue that should be taking up very much of your time. It was a transcript, and it may have been inadequate, and it's not part of the official record. Yes, Zita.
So I thank you for this summary, and much of it is correct. In fact, on December 28th, a decision was taken. 2 commissioners made a decision. The commission chair summarized that decision, and that decision was left out of the transcript and the minutes. And this is part of a deeply concerning pattern that I hope we will find a way to improve.
Executive Director?
Again, I think that this goes to my point. It is in my pretty exhaustive review of both the video and materials that no vote was taken. There was no vote taken. If there was a perceived agreement, and I would argue that one of the commissioners had fallen off of the call, and so Commissioner McGregor was no longer on the call and so could not be party to an agreement, that there was no vote taken, there was no action recorded. And that's what it is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for the staff to try to discern what decision was made by the commission lacking an actual motion and a vote on the motion. And so that's what I just can't emphasize this enough. It is not for lack of wanting to desire anything. It's just it is really difficult to ascertain if there was anything decided. And so if there's not a motion and a vote, we have to default to there wasn't a decision made.
Commissioner Downing?
Well, thanks for for those comments, Commissioner Zeta and Sam. So I think I may just suggest moving forward that we don't get too many random motions put on the floor, which is to say that, you know, the individual commissioners may have a reluctance to make a motion if it's not tied to an agenda item. So I just like to make that point. What I'm getting from this conversation is that go ahead and make a motion anytime you want, because a motion doesn't have to be tied to an agenda. It can be tied to a discussion. Am I right? And therefore,
Absolutely. Yes, have your dinosaurs ready.
yeah, and therefore, so what our executive director is saying is that she needs more concrete direction. So we as commissioners, the three of us, you know, should be more ready to just go ahead and make the motion, and then it's memorialized verbally and in the minutes.
Yes, Commissioner Zeta.
Well, I had not intended to get into the weeds on this particular item right now, but since the executive director has gone into the details of what happened or didn't happen at this particular meeting, I will read from the corrected statement.
Zeta, I'll ask you not to do that. Commissioner Zeta, I'm asking you not to do that as the chair of this meeting. Let us continue, and this, you all can have time on this if you wish later.
I appeal the chair's ruling.
Okay, so all those in favor of allowing Commissioner Zeta to read from the corrected statement, I'm speaking to the commissioners here, please raise your right hand. All those opposed, please raise your right hand. Thank you. The noes have it, so we will proceed. So I want to talk about the minutes approval process. The staff prepares draft A of the minutes and distributes it to the commission. Commissioners who see an error will inform the staff of the point on the video at which the error occurs, and the staff will prepare draft B incorporating necessary corrections. There is no bandwidth for commissioners to review draft B, the redlined version, before or when it is included in the packet. To do this is contrary to common practice under Robert's rules, and it would tie the process up in a red tape loop of version control and waste staff time. The next opportunity for the commissioners to make changes is at the meeting itself. And Robert's Rules of Order says the only proper way to object to the secretary's draft of the minutes is to provide a correction to it. So when you say, commissioners, that you want accuracy, this is how you do it. At the meeting, you make a motion to amend the minutes by changing point X on the basis of evidence Y. And it's the task of the commissioner to identify the specific change and provide facts to buttress the desired correction. The correction is accepted or rejected by majority vote, and it shouldn't require a lot of discussion. It should be very straightforward. So I urge you all, I know that you have enormous packets, that you have pages and pages and pages of material, but I urge you all to read the minutes, you commissioners, read the minutes carefully. And if you see that something is missing or that it's not what you think is correct, then make a motion to amend the draft at the meeting itself. That's the way that you will get satisfactory minutes that reflect what you want as your record. Yes, Commissioner Zeta.
That sounds like a great process. If, when evidence is presented, it is permitted to be seen. My question is, what if evidence is presented and it is not permitted to be seen?
So that's a matter for majority vote of the commission. The evidence, I would assume, initially should be presented earlier. Here, commissioners who see an error will inform the staff of the point on the video at which the error occurs. So you're giving an example perhaps where the staff decided that it was not really an error or something like that. And then at the meeting itself, you want to bring it up? Yes?
For example, the errors in the September 8th transcript and omissions, timestamps and accurate statements were provided, but we were never permitted to discuss that evidence, which was provided the same day.
So then at the meeting, you would say, I move to amend these draft minutes by changing X to read Y. And my reasoning is the timestamps from the transcript or from the recording or whatever, and I request permission to show this. And if the commissioners want to see it, then they will. And if they don't, they won't. It's majority rule. Everything comes down to majority rule.
So if the majority chooses not to see the evidence, then the errors will remain.
That's right. There's no further resolution to be made. You know, I talk about majority rule all the time, and it is also a fact that the majority can be wrong. The majority can be wrong, but that's it. That's as far as it goes.
You know, I want to just comment here too, is it seems for efficiency's sake that going back to when you first are looking at the minutes, you see a need for correction and can provide the timestamp. That's going to be way easier than trying to do it at the meeting.
Well, I think Commissioner was saying that she had done that. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
So that's certainly desirable.
Okay. So
but I would prefer not to go further in discussing any specific instance. Sam, are you speaking generally?
Generally, and so just that this is about the minutes themselves, not materials in the packet.
Exactly. The transcripts don't
just
matter.
The minutes that
Yeah.
that you'll offer correction to, not anything that was presented in the meeting.
That's right. So now I'd like to quickly, Commissioner McGregor.
I just want to interject. I think what we all need to learn from this, is particularly the three commissioners, is that we need to be able to provide clarity to staff. We don't want to leave it up to their interpretation on whether we made a decision or didn't make a decision. It should be very clear that either A, we voted to do it, or we voted not to do it, and not leave it up to interpretation. So we just have to be wary of that, because the staff can't read our minds, and we need to be very definitive in what we're asking and what we're approving.
Thank you for that comment. Commissioner Zita?
Right. So I have a question about, can we go back to your previous slide? Okay. So we get draft minutes from staff, and then commissioners can provide corrections.
Mm-hmm.
At what point will other commissioners have the ability to see those proposed changes and make decisions about them? Because as it stands now, other commissioners might never see those proposed corrections. The proposed corrections go back to staff. Staff makes the final decision, and the rest of the commission does not see the proposed changes as changes. So
my suggestion is that a commissioner sees a draft A, commissioner suggests a correction. If the staff accepts the correction and incorporates it, then the final version is going to have the correction. And I think it would be fine, you know, to put a note at the top saying this incorporates corrections suggested, blah, blah, blah. If they deny it, if they don't think that it's legit, then you bring it up at the meeting itself and say, you know, this was a correction which I offered, which was not accepted. So I now move, blah, blah, blah. In some places, you know, this intermediate step doesn't happen at all. The only chance you have in many bodies is to offer those corrections at the meeting itself. So that's why we're changing this slightly, because you have this custom. Jerry.
Well, and I think this is where it comes to play with the way that our minutes are action minutes, you know, unless an action is taken and therefore a motion and a vote, then that's what gets put in the minutes. But if it's just discussion, sometimes that doesn't get put in the minutes because it's not action related. So if, you know, commissioners want things in the minutes, then taking action makes it appear in the minutes.
I certainly agree with that. Now we're almost at the end of my portion, so I would like to race through the last little bit here. And obviously this is an important topic. So let's talk about public comment. Jurassic Parliament strongly recommends that commissioners should not respond to public comment. No matter how many times you say, I'm speaking as an individual. Residents think you're speaking as an official, and this means that there are 3 voices out there, not 1. It's confusing for everyone, and the POCAC made the same recommendation in 2018. We strongly recommend in general that bodies should not respond to public comment. We recommend that public comment should not be included in the minutes. The purpose of public comment is to inform the commissioners about the views of the public. And this purpose is achieved when the commissioners hear their constituents or when written comments are provided by email to the commissioners. Including public comments in the minutes wastes staff time. It creates the possibility of liability for the commission. It can involve a lot of time correcting it later. The comments can become a battlefield for citizens to express their views. In the city of Burien, they have something like 200 pages of public comments that they append every minute because the citizens start arguing with each other in the form of written comments to the council. Our position is the purpose of public comment is to inform the commissioners. And once you've received that comment or read that, you have been informed. Now, I want to quickly run over 3 actions to ways of changing your mind. Whoops, we've made a mistake. It's 3 different motions. Amend something previously adopted, rescind, and reconsider. So amend something previously adopted is the motion that you would use to amend the minutes once they've been approved. And it takes a 2/3 vote. So if you wanted to correct some previous minutes of 1972, you'd say, I move that we amend the minutes of 1972 by X. Takes 2/3 to pass. So this is a little diagram. I won't linger on it here, but it shows you how it goes. Then you have rescind. It's a proposal to cancel out something the group has already decided. And if something has been done that cannot be undone, this motion may not be made. If I had somebody ask me, she said, our commissioner wants to rescind the decision to approve the checks last week. Well, the checks had already been cut. There was nothing that could be done there. But if you do want to rescind something, it takes a 2/3 vote. And again, here's a little diagram of how it works. My favorite example of rescind is Talleyrand. He was a big advisor to the king. And then at the time of the French Revolution, he ran away as a French aristocrat, and the National Assembly passed a sentence of death on him. Well, he came to the United States and spent a couple of years here complaining about our soups. And in the end, he managed to get his friends to rescind the sentence of death. I feel like that's really an instance of where you would want to have that motion passed. It would be in your interest. So then he was able to return to France. Reconsider is a proposal that to reopen something already decided. And you must have voted with the prevailing side to move reconsideration. It has 2 parts. First, you vote on whether to reconsider. And if it's yes, then you resume the matter where it was just before the vote was taken. So according to Robert, it can only be moved on the same day or the next day. But some bodies in Washington state allow a motion to be reconsidered at the next meeting. So that's like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, where he's always waking up and it's 6:17 in the morning. It takes you back to where you were just before the vote was taken. And here's a little diagram for reconsider. And I just want to also mention that if a motion is defeated, it can be introduced again at a future meeting. And that's called renewing the motion. And renewal is different from reconsider, which normally may be done only at the same meeting. And some bodies have rules about that. They don't want to have somebody just bringing something up over and over again. I don't believe you have anything like that in your guidance. So conclusion. So I've talked about previously about how you have to have knowledge, you have to have a majority in favor of civility, and you have to have as chair the personal energy to put it all into practice. It's not easy. The chair can control who speaks when. The chair serves as a benevolent dictator. If someone speaks up without being recognized, you stop them. If someone speaks out of turn, you interrupt them. If someone makes insulting remarks, you cut them off. Members have a duty to obey the chair's directions. If they disagree, they can't argue back. What can they do? Anybody want to tell me? What can the members of the body do?
Appeal.
Yes, they can appeal. Now, duty isn't a word we use much nowadays. I prefer to think of it as a commitment to the principles of democracy. As a nation, we've chosen to be governed by the rule of law, and you're upholding that choice when you follow these principles on your commission with we the people. So this is your duty as a commissioner, as we've talked about. And I want to remind you that the meeting is not about your opinions. The focus of your meeting is words on paper, the motions that you pass. Don't focus on argument, focus on action. So my vision for the commission has two parts. First, phase one, each member expresses their personal views on topics before the commission with vigor, energy, commitment, and respect. Phase two, once the vote is taken, personal opinions and political views are less important than the majority vote of the commission. Members accept the decision and move on without rancor or bitterness. And I want to close with this wonderful comment from Samuel Johnson. He said, kindness is within our power, liking is not. Kindness is within our power, liking is not. You can't make yourselves like your fellow commissioners, but you can be kind to them. And you have to, because serving on a local government board is like being in a marriage arranged by the citizens. It's like being in a marriage arranged by the citizens. And as Deanna Dawson says, it's all about the relationships. So I said we were here to review key principles, guidelines, and rules that will strengthen your meeting process. I hope that we've done that, and I hope that you will take all this in the spirit of the founders. Remember, you're standing on the shoulders of giants. You all are the successors to Washington, Franklin, Hamilton, and Adams when you're carrying out the work of the Commission of the Port of Olympia. So thank you very much. I'll stop my screen share and turn it back to you, Holly. You're muted, Holly.
Okay.
Commissioner Zita.
Please.
And I want to thank you for all that useful information. And I have a question about your slide 148.
Yes.
Could you maybe put it on the screen, Anne?
Will do. Will do.
And make sure that the 148 is the one that Zita is also fit the two, if you were thinking the same slide.
Okay, just a minute here and we'll go back. What is the headline on that one, Commissioner Zita?
Chair controls who speaks when.
Right. Okay, here we go. Is it this one?
Yes.
Yes.
So what if the chair does any of those things?
Then you make a point of order. Then the member makes a point of order.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Which can be appealed. So the chair issues a ruling and either apologizes or, now notice that so the chair, actually, let me take this back. The chair is supposed to do these things. The chair is supposed to stop someone who speaks up without being recognized. The chair is supposed to interrupt someone who speaks out of turn. The chair is supposed to cut someone off who makes insulting remarks.
But the chair's not supposed to make insulting remarks.
No, exactly. So if the chair is doing any of those things, then you make a point of order. That's right. The commissioner does it. Thank you.
I got a question.
Sure.
Thanks, Anne. Oh, so Anne, in our work sessions, we don't typically take action. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean,
you don't make final decisions.
Okay.
You don't make final decisions. You can, at a work session, decide to present something to the full commission at a regular meeting or something like that. So that's fine, but I think it's very good not to take final decisions at work sessions.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
Sam.
I think in that same vein, in a work session too, it's appropriate to make a motion to direct staff to do some additional research.
Absolutely.
Or bring something back. So anything that to be in support of something that's going to a regular meeting. So I think it's perfectly fine to make a motion in a work session, so long as it's not a final decision.
That's right. I agree with that. Holly.
Yeah, I am. Oh my gosh, we need more time. That's the challenge. Okay. So did people have their initial questions answered? Anything else? Otherwise, I'm going to go back through the main points. Okay. So we have about, we have just about 10 minutes left here in our time together. And what I've been doing is trying to keep track. Can you all hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay, I've been trying to keep track of your questions and Anne's recommendations as best I can. And this is not what I'm going to ask that we do is I'm going to read them through. And this is not going to be a formal vote. This is just going to be a sense of where you stand right now so that then you can figure out what you need to bring back for further discussion. Okay, does that make sense, what we're about to do? Because we can't debate each of these items. Like, do you align with that idea or do you not align? Good? Can I see Joe? Everybody looks asleep. You guys good? Okay, here we go. Zita, are you there someplace? I can just see your blank screen.
I can see her.
Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna actually stop my video for a moment and I'm gonna to get some more bandwidth and I'm gonna share my screen. Oh, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. Aspen, can you give me the screen?
I just did, so you should be good now.
Okay. Okay, issues to clarify. Here we go. So you're gonna just, because we're having a little trouble with bandwidth, I'll just ask for you in the same order to either say yes or no, like you're in alignment or you're not in alignment. And again, this is just to give us, this is not a vote. This is just to give us a sense of where we are. So can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to just ask you to do a yes or a no. So the question that we had was about our process of confirming minutes. Anne's recommendation that staff provide the action minutes in the packet, no red line versions of comments going back and forth. And at the meeting, commissioners vote to accept the minutes or offer a specific correction, and then the commission votes on that. So that is my understanding of the recommendation. And I'll just ask you if you're in alignment with that or you're not. And that just, again, will give us an idea. So Downing, can you guys speak instead of thumbs up?
Okay. I hate to be throw a wrench in the works, but you know, this is, it's not 100% the most efficient because one small change is that I'd like to see corrections from a commissioner, not naming the commissioner, just to see the correction. So then I don't have to read the whole minutes twice because I'm probably notorious, and Aspen can say something bad about me, but I'm notorious for, you know, being tardy on reading my minutes. And so, you know, if I was able to glance at it and say, oh, the original version is perfect with one exception, they got the spelling of somebody's name wrong. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally get it. And
okay.
What I'm going to suggest is, in the interest of time, folks not give their reasons quite yet. But even though that was a beautiful example, Joe, I loved it. I loved like you understanding your thinking. But in the interest of time, it's just kind of like yes and no, and then we'll come back.
Sorry. Okay.
Zita, where are you at?
Yes, I agree with Downing.
Oh, so a no on that. McGregor?
Yes, I agree. No, I mean.
Oh, you agree? No.
Yeah, because I have more to say about that. So go ahead.
So this needs more. So what we know then, if you can see my screen, is more discussion is needed, right? We're not in alignment with Anne's recommendation. Okay. This is about presenting slides. Anne recommends that it's the staff responsibility, not commissioners, to prepare materials for presentation, including PowerPoint slides, maps, other materials. So Anne is suggesting that it is not the role of commissioners to present slides. So I'm going to ask the same question. Downing, where do you stand on the recommendation?
Yes. Okay.
Zita?
Disagree, confusing if we're providing minutes corrections with timestamps.
This is about presenting slides.
Yeah, disagree.
Okay, McGregor?
Yes.
Okay. Confirm that Thursday at 3 p.m. is the timeline for commissioners adding materials to the packet, but the recommendation, this is, I don't think, the real question. The recommendation is against supplemental materials because it usurps staff role and fiduciary duties to present the commission supplemental material. So Anne's taking it a step farther, saying that you would not actually include or that commissioners would not include supplemental materials in the packet. So Downing, where you at with that?
Yes. Yes.
Zita?
These are two separate things. This is confusing.
Yeah, get rid of this. This is not even really.
Well, actually, then it's redundant with the previous one.
It's the right. It is somewhat redundant, but let's just do it anyway because it came on a different question.
So
Say no
if
again.
we're voting on the original point, confirming that Thursday is the deadline, I will say yes. If
Okay.
we're voting on the same item as above, my vote is the same as above. It's unclear what we're doing here.
Okay. Let me just check then. Is everybody clear? I'm going to separate these out. Zita, thank you. That was, I appreciate that was confusing. So is there, so in terms of confirming that Thursday at 3 p.m. is the timeline for adding any supplemental materials, we're clear on that. Let's just point on that. So Zita's saying yes.
I say yes if we get the packet when it's due.
McGregor, where are you at on this?
Well, are we talking about supplemental materials that a commissioner is adding?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm somewhat confused. I'd say no, I don't want any supplementary materials added to the packet. If we need to do that, we could have that done. We could request staff do that or something, but no, I don't think we should.
This question, we have a yes, and no on that one. I'm sorry. And all I'm doing on this, if there were supplemental materials that they would be in there by 3 p.m. I've got these two together, but they're actually two separate things. So I apologize for the confusion. So Downing, assuming that if there were supplemental materials, you would still understand
Yes.
at 3 p.m.
Yes.
Okay, so you're all in agreement on this one, and there's differences of opinions on the supplemental materials. Okay, just what decision was made on March 23rd? You had a couple of these. There was the other one in September, but the record shows that no vote was taken and the importance of a formal vote rather than agreement. You guys said the same thing last time, that we have to be cleaner about your votes. So I'm going to just see where we're at with this one. Downing, that we really need to direct by having a formal vote. Where are you at with that?
Yes.
Zita?
We have not had an opportunity to review the evidence.
Okay, but
we do not know what we do not know.
Yeah, but the principle here is that the record shows that no vote was taken. The importance of the formal vote rather than agreement. Are you in line with that?
Okay, again, we're doing two separate things here. Are we talking about March 23rd or are we talking about the principle? If we're talking about March 23rd, we do not have the evidence because we have not had the opportunity to present it and discuss it. If we're talking about the principle of a formal vote, that is a separate thing.
Okay, let's take the principle. Importance of I'm going to move this down. Importance of a formal vote rather than agreement. Zita, where are you at on that question?
On that question, I would agree. On the question of March 20th, on the question of March 23rd, not prepared to agree with that.
Okay, so I think this has to do with we have to go back to there because Anne had a whole other thing about how to go back in time. So we'll talk about that separately. McGregor, importance of a formal vote rather than agreement.
Yes.
Right. Best practices around adding public comments to the meeting minutes. So Anne is not recommending that. And again, there's the question about how the vote was on March, 13th and 23rd. But the purpose that do you about including public comment in the record? Where do you stand on that right now? Am I clear?
Downing as do not include.
Zita?
I say include. We've decided to do it twice and the state legislature does it.
Okay, McGregor?
So public comment is verbal, or are we talking written? If it's
Written. This is written.
Well, that's not what it says, so.
You're right, it's not, but that's what we had agreed to.
Well, we didn't take
And
a
that's
vote
what
on
we
it, so I'm
did
not
for-
agreeing to that. So
That's it.
about adding public comments, if it's the written, I'll go with no. Not Adam.
Okay, so that's a yes.
I would
Okay.
think the same standard should be for both. I mean, why would we let some be included and not some others?
Well, I think the purpose of public comment is to inform the commissioners. Okay, we should have in there who gave public comment, but I don't think we need to put the substance of what the public comment was in the minutes. That's where I'm coming from.
It with the action minutes with the guys.
I think that's a useful clarification, Commissioner McGregor, that we should include who gives public comment, whether it's written or verbal.
And that would be a departure. That's certainly up to the commission. If you, right now, we just state how many people gave public comment. We don't list their names.
Okay, you guys are doing great. I know this is a lot to get through. This goes back to an early thing. Commissioner Zita, no, it's about the process for changing our procedures and practices. And Anne gave us a bunch of stuff on that. I'm gonna jump over this one because I think there's a lot of new content there. So I think I think you need to read it, come back. Are we clear that the commission shall vote to add agenda items to the list for future work session, but not schedule? And confirm, we had discussed this before, and confirm that this is a best practice. I think we're all in agreement, but let's double check. And sorry, I'm copying and pasting just to make your lives harder. Is everybody still in alignment with that or not? Downing?
Yes.
Okay, Zita?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, okay. So now these are ones that don't have to do with our questions. These are other ones that Anne recommended today. Can people stay just 10 minutes later? We can wrap this up. There's just 3 more.
I'm not sure. I think we need discussion on this one. I mean, I think we're getting into the weeds here.
Okay. So how about if these are all just things that came up during the meeting. How would you guys, I did my best to get us through them. How would you like to proceed? Because we're out of time that we had scheduled. Do you want to maybe bring this to a work session? We'll get a little more clarity on this.
Yeah, I was going to suggest, Holly, that we could schedule you at a future work session and we can do a summary of these things and affirmation and any clarification that's needed.
Right. Okay. And Zita, I want to just follow up on your point of still feeling like, there's minutes that still need to go back to. And I think, Anne, let's make sure we pull forward that, because I think Anne provided some good guidance today on how to do that procedurally. So let's just make sure we follow up on that and review that so we're clear. Okay, gang. Yeah.
Looks like Commissioner McGregor has his hand up.
Yeah.
Can we get a copy of all of her slides?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I will send a copy of the notes, including this little sheet with cleaned up as best I can.
I think the slides are in your packet, actually. I think Aspen included them.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't usually print them out because it's so big.
I'll send you just the slides.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. So friends, that was one heck of a presentation. So we're going to do a quick checkout with knowing that we're going to still do a little bit more to clean this up at a future work session. And so we'll do final just appreciations, anything you want to say. And yeah, I'm going to start with Jerry.
Well, I just want to say that I appreciate the commission's willingness to continue to improve on our processes and procedures and helping bring clarity to decisions. And so staff is very clear on the direction. So thank you for your time today.
Excellent, thanks. And Commissioner Downing.
Oh, yeah, I found it very useful. And you never disappoint. So, you know, it's fascinating to listen to you, and appreciate the care and finesse in which you put your slides together. And I definitely got some takeaways.
Great, thank you so much. That's great to hear.
Commissioner Zita.
And I want to thank you for the reminder. I think we need a parliamentarian to help us at the meeting, so thanks for helping us get that. Your reminder that the majority rules is apt. If the majority chooses not to see the evidence, then the error will remain.
That's right.
And that happened today a few times, so kind of same old, same old.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner McGregor.
Well, it's like drinking from a fire hose sometimes on these things, but I do have a reliable, let's see, where do I go? Robert's Rules for Dummies. There we go.
Yeah. All
Very
right.
good. It's a good book.
Great. And closing comments for you.
I'm so grateful to you all. This is tough. You know, this is tough material, and it involves challenging issues and strong feeling, and your commitment to keep it through and stick it through is really admirable. So I'm very grateful to you, and I appreciate all you do for the Port of Olympia. Thank you.
Yay. Thank you, Ann. And Sam, Ms. Gibney.
Yes, and thank you to everyone here for your attention, and would agree. And you have just a unique talent to keep rapt attention in something that could be considered fairly dry by by another presenter. So thank you so much for that. And really, it's all in service of, you know, how do we have an orderly process so that we can fulfill our mission of serving the community. So towards that end, I super appreciate everyone's attention here and commitment to our continued improvement and employment of these rules.
Thank you.
Well, I'll just wrap it up then by thanking everybody who was here witnessing our training today. It was very rich and opened up more questions. My favorite two moments were, one is when there was like, and you actually modeled how to like keep things moving with that appeal. I was just like dumbstruck by the efficiency of what it would look like. And my other favorite part was the throwing of the dinosaurs. I think we had a bet going on that, everybody, about whether or not the dinosaurs would emerge. And I really enjoyed that moment. Good humor is always a blessing. So yeah, I think we just keep working through it and getting clearer. And you guys are doing a great job of just making sure your processes are clean so that you can show up and that we can, you know, if there's issues, that we can address them. You know, if things don't feel right, that we have a methodology by which we can come back to them. So if you have anything that you want to say after this meeting, recommendations or questions, feel free to email me, and then we'll just move right along. Okay.
And thank you, Holly. Thank you for facilitating.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye-bye.